Excuse me, counsel, when you say coaching, are we still talking about employees or do we move into deer?
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story, although it's very much our story, live, unfolding in the moment. So I'm on the second week of our 2-week vacation. And the first time ever that we've tried to record like while traveling, I brought my microphone, I have my computer, I got all set up in our little Airbnb and sort of a little back scenes of, so here's my story, HQ back scenes information. This thing happens sometimes, and it just happened, where Elliot and I, you and I, I'm talking about you in the third person.
Well, first of all, I always call myself in the third person. Makes me seem a lot more authoritative. And secondly, right at the beginning, you said, so we're in the second week of our 2-week vacation. And I was like, oh, well, you might want to clarify that I'm not there.
Correct. So Elliot is in Baltimore. I am in North Carolina with my family. And so we get on, and this has happened numerous times over the years where we get together to record and you're like, do you have a story? I don't know. Do you have a story? I have one, but I don't know where it's going. And the energy is just not there. And usually what we do is we punt to a different day. If it's, we've had to come back like the next day, we know that like late afternoon's not our time. And we've always been able to figure it out. There have been a few occasions where if our weeks are crazy, we like throw in a replay. But so that was just happening just now. You and I were not getting off the ground with something to record about. And normally I think we would have punted, we can't do a different day, but we would have done a replay, but we did a replay last week. So we're like,
you can't do 2 in a row.
I'm not going to do in a row.
No.
And so we were a little panicked. We're out of options. And then you said, to be honest, I'm a little burned out. And that to me, I think is worth an episode. We're at least going to give it a whirl. It might be terrible. And there might be a second replay.
But to go back, so let's just flesh that out a little bit. So here's the conversation. Do you have a story? Well, so I'm like, well, I really found this thing that McCormick was advertising for the director of taco relations as a 6-figure job. What about something on that? Like, that is fascinating, but no, that didn't grab you. And you're like, I booked a cave room in a Tennessee hotel that turned pitch black and almost, really didn't turn out the way I wanted to. And then I wasn't really feeling that one.
You're like, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And then I started talking about bumping into pedestrians in Kuala Lumpur and how they seem a lot more courteous than they would in Florida. And you're like, yeah, that's really that's only marginally interesting. Like, okay.
Right. But that's kind of the point. It's not always energy and motivation and connection and verve and like all the things that get us up off the ground and moving forward, not just you and I, but in general, in work and in life, it's a 2-part thing. There's like what someone's laying down and then whether or not you're in a mood to pick it up. And so if, I'm sort of checked out right now because I'm on vacation, as I should be checked out. So my mind's not like clicking and clanking like it normally would be. And you're burned out from a very long couple of days, as you were telling me.
Yeah, I had. This is where our story ideas really hit rock bottom because I was telling you I had a 7-hour deposition yesterday, and the most fascinating thing about my entire day, 7 hours talking about anti-poaching regulations, was that the attorney on the other side was named. And still is named Elliot Turner, and he spells his name the same way I do, which I've literally never run into before.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
Oh, just one L, one T. That's the part that's never did. Yeah.
So, right. So the whole point of my story with that cause is the best reaction I can get from somebody else when I tell that story is, huh. So,
well, actually, can we go back for 1 second? Poaching, you mean like animals or like stealing employees?
Stealing employees. So in the franchise system, franchise 1 if there's a regulation that franchise one can't take from franchise two, and then are you restricting the occupational freedom of these employees?
Yeah. Okay. See, that's not interesting to me. I thought maybe it was like, that's not interesting.
And that was 30 seconds. Imagine 7 hours of that.
Well, it would have been much more interesting if it was like about like poaching elephants or like regulations of, if you're saving safari, as you're saving the deserts of Africa.
Chimed in. Excuse me, counsel. When you say poaching, are we still talking about employees, or do we move into deer? Something like the King's Forest.
Yeah, the King's Forest. But back to the point. Oh yeah, we didn't really have one. But it's like, what do you do when it's just not working? Because the reason that in the past we have typically punted to a different day, or in rare occasions, jumped to a replay, or those kinds of things, is that we learn, like, if it's not working, it's not working. Like we've recorded episodes when we're both tired at 4:00 on a day, and they're just not good episodes. And this one still has the potential to be a very not good episode. But I think it's worth talking about, like, what do you do? Like, how do you I have a couple go-tos, and I really wish we had a call-in show right now so we could have people call in and say, here's what I do. And that's not happening. But I think it's a worthwhile question. How far do you push a lack of energy, and where do you say, this just isn't working, and do something different?
So I think there are two scenarios. One is just, a lack of energy in general, that's not just in the moment, but it carries over a couple of days. So, for example, a good friend of mine is a teacher, and because it's summer, we've started to schedule breakfast at least once a month. Now, we have our last one in August. I won't get to see him until December, because that's kind of the way it generally works with his schedule in mind. But I've started to schedule more time with people who have nothing to do with business, who are friends and just contacts of people that energize me. We've talked about that before. The other part is the minute to minute, as opposed to day in, day out, week in, week out. And that's like that. So, for example, if you need a meeting to get whatever it is accomplished, or you need to push through, and we don't have the option of saying, let's just do it tomorrow, or the tomorrow's another day thing. So I think that, for me, sometimes it's as different as changing the venue. You talked about doing a walking meeting in a mall. When I was a kid in school, the best thing that we could ever do is when the teacher said to have class outside.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes, you can just move the meeting to outside if you have a setting. So you can change the things around your mental state.
That's actually, so I just want to, I'll interrupt here a couple of times. That like changing your environment can absolutely shift the energy. I mean, it's kind of funny, when I was looking for where to record here, this house has terrible acoustics. It's lovely, but the acoustics are really bouncy. And my husband suggested I go do it in the car. And I was like, oh, I don't want to, I just didn't think I'd feel the vibe of sitting in the car all pumped up. I was like, no, I want to sit where I have this beautiful view, and then I'll feel inspired. Clearly that didn't help much, but it reminds.
What kind of train wreck would this have been had you been in the car?
No, it would have just really been, as long as I didn't have it on, because it's in a garage. So Jody dies halfway through. But when you just said that, though, it reminded me that when my son was little, there was a period where he was just really struggling in school and frustrated all the time. And he would get really frustrated with homework. And I was messing around with him around, what can we do to make it more fun? Can we finish one page and then play a game and then finish a page or something? I was jumping around, helping him try to devise ways to get through it without it being so frustrating. And he said, well, what if we did each thing in a different room? I'm like, all right. I didn't think of it that way, but it did. It worked. We'd finish the thing and then we'd go to the next room and do it. And for whatever reason, and he'd finish the thing and I'd throw Cheerios into his mouth across the room. We tried that too.
That's really good, considering your son is training to be a dolphin.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
he was tiny.
One of those SeaWorld things.
So I do. So changing the environment is one, I think. Making sure you're getting things that aren't, that as you said, people that aren't business oriented. I think of that as layering in other other colors into the fabric that aren't just the ones, the doldrums of like every single day. It's funny, you're talking about burnout from work. It does remind me of earlier in this trip. The first half of the trip was road trip. And then the second half of the trip, we're plopped at this little mountain Airbnb and just chilling out. And what's interesting is about 2/3 of the way through the road trip part of it, we were going to spend a couple of days in Nashville. And I wanted to go to Nashville for a long time. I went there in high school, but I haven't been there since. And there's lots of I don't even know specifically what I want to see. I just wanted to hang out in Nashville and whatnot.
But, you know what Graceland is, or is that not?
Graceland is Memphis. Yeah.
Then forgive the interruption.
we were also in Memphis though. We spent a few days in Memphis, and by the time we got to Nashville, we were just exhausted from the move in, move out. We had very active days, long tours with walking. We'd done a lot in those days, and we got to Nashville. And we had this energy of, oh, we got to go see this and we got to go see that and we got to do this and we got to do that. And at the end of the day, we were like, or not, like, maybe we just chill out here for a day. We don't have to see everything in Nashville. Like the whole point of this vacation is chilling. We were burnt out on, which sounds like a weird thing to use on a fun vacation road trip, but we were feeling burnt out about that. So we took a day to just chill out and rest and do nothing. And
well, look, you have to. It does come down to certain priorities and certain uses of the word should. Like, for example, I remember when I was a teenager, my family went took this lightning trip of Europe, and it was like London and Paris and Venice and Florence and Rome and just a number of cities. It was probably like 9 cities in 4 days and 7 nights. And but anyway, you can't do a trip like that without at some point, as my mother would say, being churched out. Because that's where all the the history and the culture and the art and everything centered in the churches. And so you could say, just like in Nashville, you know what, we just want to experience a street market and eat in a cafe and whatever. But you can't go to Paris for the only time at that point and not go to the Louvre and not go to the Eiffel Tower or certain things. So there are certain shoulds that are the cornerstones that you have to do. And then you get to
I think that's probably true. And when I by the way, as a quick side note, just because I think this is a cool little thing we discovered, is if ever you're in a town and you don't have a lot of time and you want to experience it, and we weren't this intentional about it, we just did it for fun. And then I realized what a cool way it is to get a vibe of a town. Because we had about a half day in Louisville before we were booked for this like zip line cave tour, which was a blast. But we had several hours. We got there earlier than we meant to, and I wasn't sure what to go see or do. And we ended up just for fun getting the doesn't matter what brand it is, the scooters. I think we had the Bird is one brand. There's another brand that's Lime. Lime was the ones we picked up. There's a bunch of different ones, but we got the little scooters and we scooted around the waterfront park and then up through town. And we got to see the town in like this easy breezy zip through town, kind of check it out. And it was a fun way to experience an area without, all the hubbub of like trying to figure out where to go and whatever. I just thought it was a neat little way to see a town. But
that does bring up so talking about changing the setting is one thing, but if you decide that one of the things you have to do, just like you have this meeting or we have this podcast or whatever, you have to get that accomplished. And so one way to do it is just to see certain sites and do what you'd normally do. And another way is just to change the way you're doing it. So for example, if you had to go through this meeting and you don't have the energy for the meeting, and the meeting always runs in a certain way, you can, and I've seen this done, you can change, make different rules. Each person has 2 minutes at the beginning to talk about what's really bothering them, or you've got 2 minutes to talk about this, or pick your biggest issue and we'll spend on that. But you can give other people the microphone, or you can shuffle the deck as far as how you're going to accomplish the thing that you can't put off.
Yeah, no, so here I thought I was going down a tangent, and actually that's a great, instead of the way you think of going to a city where there are these big rocks of experiences. Like, I mean, let's stick with the Paris thought for a second. Experiencing Paris, of like going to the Louvre, going to the Eiffel Tower. Those things are often in different places. You have to get there. You have to see the thing. It's a big, long experience to be there, which is also like how many of those things that take 3 or 4 hours to see can you see in one day? And do you have the energy for that? Versus experiencing Paris, zipping around on a scooter or just simply sitting at a cafe watching Parisians walk by. That is also experiencing Paris in just a very different way. And both have value, and both, there's some decisions there. But to your point of when you're feeling downtrodden and you don't have the energy for something, what I think the theme we're hearing here is change. Like, what can I change about this to get it off the mark? I mean, interestingly, even us just getting started, I feel more energy. Like now, if we went back to some of those original stories, I might actually have more energy for them now that we actually have the energy flowing.
Want to do the taco relations?
No, not this. I do want to do the taco relations. What is it? Was it like minister of taco relations?
Not minister. That seems overly religious.
No. Oh, no, like the like
or directorate of it's the director of taco relations.
Oh, so I don't think of minister in a religious sense. That I don't know. It's maybe even Harry Potterish, like the minister of dark magic, or like that, like czar. It's right up there with czar.
I don't think you can be a minister. I think you have to be a taco minister or a director of taco relations.
Okay, whatever. Can you be the czar of taco relations?
It seems to be cultural appropriation if you're the czar of
fair point. Fair point. I hadn't really thought about that. That's a bummer, because the czar is a very funny thing for me. I don't know why, but I always think that's hysterical.
It wasn't during the pogroms, but I know that.
All right, fair point. Fair point. So before we wrap up this scintillating topic, And I love the fact that once we're done recording, we're going to discuss. We're like, was that good enough for an episode, or do we just do a replay? No. I don't know.
But we did throw in the pogroms, and we haven't done that in several hundred episodes. So,
all right. So before we wrap up this episode, and I get back to hot tubbing and eating lots of food I probably shouldn't be. I do want to remind people that we are doing this giveaway all the way up through our shared birthday on September 1st, which if you want to be entered in the drawing, you either join the Facebook group or you join our little text. You can text us at 410-632-6894. Both of those things, the Facebook group and the text, an easy way to text us, you can find on our website at sohere'smystory.com. Right at the top, there are tabs with links. That makes that really simple, because we want to hear from you. Like I really would. I mean, one of your concerns about jumping into this burnout episode was you were like, but we don't have an answer. Like, and I was like, we don't have to have an answer. It's just, it's like raising the questions. And I really would love to hear from people. When do you push through? How do you push through when you have to push through? I mean, one last thing I think about doing is when I have to push through, and I've sort of exhausted my ways of changing it. Like a lot of times I can't push through at night. So I'll go ahead and go to bed at some ridiculously early hour and get up at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And that works for me. That's better than trying to like do things at night. But the other thing that I will do, and I've now forgotten what I'm
Okay. But so while you're thinking about that, I will mention to people using the texting feature and communicating with us. If you feel like you want to communicate with us and you're really not feeling it, feel free to just leave part of a sentence. Just, if you're just like, yeah, I just don't have it today. Sentence fragments are fine. You don't even have to finish the sentence. Just as long as they get in touch, that's all I care about. Exactly.
So while we do that, we do have, because we did a replay last week and we didn't redo the recording, we actually are drawing 2 names this week. So I did that right before we got on. I closed my eyes and scrolled the thing and stopped and pointed. And our 2 winners this week are Stephen Sharp and Cheryl Nichols, who are both members of our Facebook group. So I will be reaching out to both of you to figure out how the best way to get you your Starbucks cards. We've had 4 winners so far. We have, I think, 5 left, maybe 6. I haven't counted. So join in. Join in.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group.
Which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts.
Your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village,
Yes, it does.
we'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky
Ooh,
team.
yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of
Lovingly
ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Including wrangling us.
Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.